with the scent of potpourri, the films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly podcast reviewing two new or recent release titles with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find more of my work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes and spin-off podcasts at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also follow me on Letterboxd and other social media platforms at the username of Obsessive Viewer. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Recently on Patreon, I posted a in progress as it was airing Academy Awards kind of reaction, as basically I was watching it alone in my apartment, and as I was watching it I was recording at each commercial break my reactions, and I threw that up on Patreon for free, so free members and paid members have access to it. Link in the show notes. And otherwise on Patreon for paid members, I am still reviewing Severance season 2 episode by episode. I'm a little bit behind, but I will catch up before the finale in a couple of weeks. And I also have immediate reactions for Mickey 17 and Novocaine up there, and I'll have more stuff on there in the near future as well. Once again, you can sign up for all of that and so much more at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And if you want to support me without messing with Patreon and just want to make a donation or what have you, you can always buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/obsessiveviewer. So yeah, all of that is in the show notes of the episode. And this week on the show, I will be reviewing a little bit later in the episode the new Netflix sci-fi movie from the Russo Brothers, The Electric State, in this week's secondary review. But before that, we're going to go over some movie news and Indianapolis screenings before reviewing the new Bong Joon Ho movie Mickey 17 in this week's feature review. And joining me is my friend and IFJ colleague, whose work can be found at awakeinthedark.com, and he can be followed on Letterboxd at the handle of Awake in the Dark. It's Brent Leuthold. Welcome back to the show, Brent. How are you doing this fine evening?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice. Of course. Thank you so much for being here and for talking with me about movies. Yeah, especially today, because like it is like, I don't know if it's this nice where you are, but it's like 70 degrees and it's like, it's incredible. So
yeah, it was like in the like high 60s yesterday. It's more like in the 50s now, but it's still like Aubrey and I just walked over, and it was like, it's still like great walking around weather, and
nice.
You know, it's after daylight saving now, so it's you know, a little lighter later. So yeah, fun time to be out and about.
Oh, absolutely. And for the listeners, if they're out and about, what I would strongly recommend, as my voice cracks on the mic, is to take your phone out. Like, I know a lot of people say, like, you know, don't like enjoy outside and everything, but in this scenario, take your phone out and go to awakeinthedark.com and read some of Brent's recent reviews. You recently reviewed Mickey 17, My Dead Friend Zoe, and The Monkey. How are the reviews going over at Awake in the Dark? And how did you feel about those movies too, if you want to give a preview to your reviews?
Yeah, My Dead Friend Zoe, I enjoyed quite a bit. Nice. That's the kind of comedy drama about a veteran coming back home and basically having, you know, her friend that at some point that she was kind of over there with in the army at some point died, and you kind of find out more about that. It sounds like kind of morbid, but it ends up being just a really, I think, really well judged debut. The director, writer and director, I'm sorry, I should have his name down, but was actually in the army as a veteran. So nice cast too. Ed Harris is in it. Natalie Morales. Nice. God. The lead actress, I'm sorry, I forget her name. She's been on Star Trek Discovery and some other shows, but I hadn't really seen her in very many movies, and she was really fantastic in it.
Nice. So is it not Sonequa Martin Green?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I had maybe seen her in a movie before. Anyway, she's the lead in this, and she was really terrific. Natalie Morales plays the dead friend Zoe, and
the
then
titular,
dead friend Zoe. And Morgan Freeman's in there as well. So yeah, it's a solid one. It's probably already out of theaters, but I think it'll probably be rentable this month. So cool. nice find there. I was that was a good one. And
nice.
And yeah, obviously we'll talk more about Mickey 17.
yeah. I really like Natalie Morales. Did you see the pandemic movie with her and the guy, one of the brothers, Jesus, the therapy movie, the COVID therapy movie. I don't
know. One of the Duplass brothers?
Yes, Duplass brothers.
Okay, I haven't seen it. And I actually can't remember what it's called, but I feel like that sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I really liked, I think it was, Language Lessons. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it was
Didn't
Mark
she direct
Duplass.
that?
She did, yeah. Okay. And co-wrote it with Mark Duplass.
Nice.
Yeah, I really liked that. I thought it was very, very touching.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah. She's just one of those folks who kind of pops up, in film and TV quite a bit. I'm trying to think, maybe the last movie I saw her in was, I think Self-Reliance, the one I think we talked about somewhat in passing. She's in it pretty briefly.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, she's been in a lot of stuff and she's great. She's great in this. And I mean, that's she's basically playing kind of the sort of, ghost character, if you will, but she's still like herself, but it's like this idea that she's kind of like a PTSD ghost. And the more that people kind of press the main character, like about trying to reveal more about, what went on over there and that sort of stuff, she gets really defensive. So it's a good performance from her too.
Very cool.
But yeah, Sonequa Martin Green was like really because I just hadn't seen her in that much. And again, it's a really, it's just a really very full and kind of rich, complex performance. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites so far this year.
Very cool. I will have to check it out, which means like the next time you're on the podcast, I will say, hey, I'm sorry I haven't checked out My Dead Friend Zoe yet. So, but yeah, it'll be on my radar now. So yeah. Something that should also be on the radar of the listeners is what's playing this week in Indy. So I've been doing this for, as you guys know, the last several months, just kind of highlighting some things that are going on in some local Indianapolis theaters. I'll be really quick. Alamo Drafthouse is still doing their David Lynch movies. This weekend, if you're listening to this day of release, is going to be Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, Wild at Heart, and Eraserhead. And they're also, throughout the month of March, they're going to be showing some basketball movies. So like Semi-Pro, Hoosiers, and there was one other one that I can't, I think Love and Basketball, and maybe something else. But those are at Alamo Drafthouse. Check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes to find tickets and everything. Elsewhere at the Can on March 20th, they're doing the Terminator VHS screening. So that is there, and they have tickets available now. And at Keystone Art in my backyard, I say that because I live near it, which is pointless to kind of point out. But anyway, Keystone Art on Tuesday, they are showing, Tuesday, March 18th, they're showing Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And then throughout the month of April, they're also going to be doing a David Lynch retrospective. On Tuesdays, they're going to be showing David Lynch, The Art of Life, or The Art Life, Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, and Mulholland Drive throughout the month of April on Tuesdays. And finally, over at Flix Brew House in Carmel, they're going to be showing this weekend, or March 21st to the 24th, they're going to be showing Interstellar, so that's next weekend, Interstellar and The Boy and the Heron. So ticket information and links to those theaters are available in the show notes of this episode, which can also be found at obsessiveviewer.com/OV470. And any of those pique your interest, Brent? And if I were to go to one of the David Lynch movies that are showing in any of those theaters, which one would you suggest that I prioritize out of like Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, which I've already seen? But
I would probably, I guess I would maybe try, Eraserhead would be fun to watch with a crowd. Nice. I'd maybe go for that one in terms of the features. I will say David Lynch, The Art Life is a really strong documentary. Nice. And lest people think that it's like a retrospective or like a talking head thing or even where he's talking about a lot of it. It's a lot more about kind of his just general like philosophy. It's a lot about actually his like art in terms of like painting and his music as well. They do, of course, like the film stuff, of course, is in there, but it's more his like earlier work, like pre-Eraserhead, the short films. But it's a really good mix of just like, it's mainly him. It is him like kind of talking through things, but it's not like, oh, well, when we were, I'm not going to try to do a David Lynch impression, but like when we were shooting Dune, you know, it's like, it's not that sort of documentary. It's a lot more, I don't want to say esoteric, but it's a lot more kind of really just about like his spirit, his essence. So, I mean, I think especially, of course, with his relatively recent passing, you know, that's, I think that's a really good one to, whether you see it in a theater, I guess that's kind of up to you, but that's a really strong one. I don't know if when he passed, I put a link to that. I don't know where it's streaming right now. I watched it on Prime like several years ago whenever it came out, but
I want to say it might be on Criterion Channel. Yeah,
it's on Criterion.
I think maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely a good one. And again, it's even if you're not necessarily like a huge fan of his films or Twin Peaks or anything like that, it's just cool to watch just someone who was, you know, they're just complete original. I mean, they're their own kind of like artistic force that, you know, which just continues, of course, to be so influential and is just so comfortable in his expression. So it's a great watch.
Very cool. Okay, I will keep that in mind. That David Lynch, The Art Life, is playing at Keystone Art on April 1st. So those are $5 tickets too for paid loyalty members there. So keep that in mind. But I will definitely check that out if I have the opportunity to, if I have the time and everything. But yeah, cool. Thank you for the recommendation. And yeah, so before we get into our feature review tonight, I do have a couple of news pieces. The news was kind of light. I chose not to include, and by saying this out loud, I'm now going to include it in this, but I chose not to include like the news update about Gene Hackman's passing, like the circumstances of his passing. Just that the news that came out about it is just very tragic and it's very sad, but just want to say once again, we mourn the loss of Gene Hackman. Yeah. So do you have like a favorite Gene Hackman performance, Brent?
Oh my goodness. I thought you were going to get all your Gene Hackman stuff out with the people who knew what they're talking about. Man, obviously, just a titan. You know, personally for me, I think The Conversation is kind of one of the ones that really sticks with me. I just, you know, I love that film. And I think he's, you know, outstanding in it. And just the whole vibe of that. I guess I guess that's maybe what you're asking. Like when I think of him, what's like the one, and that's him mournfully playing saxophone in his apartment is like, that's just like the instant image that kind of sticks with me. But, you know, of course, I mean, throw, you know, a dartboard at a Gene Hackman performance dartboard and you'll get so many. But yeah, that's probably the one I would have to say if that's kind of the one that I feel like I kind of go to. It's that one. Nice.
Yeah, that's a great one. So yeah. But to actually get to the news that I have kind of earmarked for this episode, just that there hasn't been that much going on, or I didn't really spend a lot of time collating or compiling the news or anything, but 2 casting announcements for different movies that I kind of want to talk about or touch on today. As of this recording, it was announced that Stranger Things star Sadie Sink is going to join Tom Holland in the next Spider-Man movie. There is no talk about like what character she's playing, but I think there's theories that she might be, they might use her to introduce Jean Grey from the X-Men into that world, into the MCU and everything. But yeah, it could be anything. How do you feel about this? Are you excited about Spider-Man 4, like continuing the saga of Tom Holland as Peter Parker?
I mean, I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I should be. I like all 3 of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
I just I feel like No Way Home, in a way, I feel like capped off the trilogy very well, but I also know it did kind of end on a cliffhanger, so it's kind of both. But yeah, I don't know is John Watts is he returning to direct? I really don't know anything else about the movie.
Yeah,
so.
I honestly don't really know either. I really don't know if he's returning or if they got someone else. Destin Daniel Cretton is going to be directing.
Yeah.
So
Shang-Chi was pretty good, and honestly, I've been mixed on his dramas. I love Short Term 12, but Glass Castle was really, really bad, and the Just Mercy was pretty good.
Yeah, it was
Just
okay.
Mercy was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was Just Mercy. So yeah, I mean, I think if they're going to continue to work with indie director, I don't know. We talked about this on Captain America. I guess we don't really have to rehash or whatever, but
right.
I guess they're just going to find their folks and kind of do the bidding and plug in whatever amount of personality they can, and everything else is pretty much what the machine is going to crank out.
It's
which has been a very successful machine, very generally good machine, I will say.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah. I mean, Sadie Sink is great, and I mean, I don't know whoever's going to play, but do they have any? Or is that something that's going to be in 26 or 27 probably? Because I know they're shooting the Odyssey right now.
Yeah,
and Tom Holland's in that.
I want to say that it might be earmarked for 26. Because I can't imagine that they are wanting to push it out until 27.
They probably want to get Peter as young as possible. That was always the idea with with those. That's the other thing is I kind of feel so let's see, Homecoming I think was in 2017. We're now in 20. So that was 8 years ago. He whatever, he still probably looks young. And I think in the movies is he probably going to college now, so it's not too bad. So anyway, they'll do whatever they're going to do. I'll see it, and I'll cover it on the show for sure. Oh yeah. Apparently it is marked for July 31st, 2026. So okay. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to do that with the Odyssey, but I don't know exactly how long the shooting's going to be for that. But I think they're shooting right now.
Yeah, they are.
I think there was a shot of Chris and Tom with little water wings or something.
Yeah. Which this is
go ahead.
Oh no! I was just gonna say this is a tangent, but this is weird. It's not worth mentioning or anything. But basically, they keep saying it's the Odyssey. Obviously, that's the title. But I'm waiting for them to reveal that it's just gonna be called Odyssey, because Christopher Nolan is very fond of those one-word titles, and I can't imagine him having the Odyssey on there. I feel like it's just going to be Odyssey, or it's going to be something just...
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're right. The majority of his movies, I mean, there's The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, but pretty much beyond that,
everything
I think
else,
they're all... It's lose the it's cleaner,
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'll I'll try to reach out to him by fax or whatever, because he doesn't have a cell phone or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, carrier pigeon or
yes. But to round out the news before the review segment, there was another piece of casting news for another movie that involves radio silence, which we at the Obsessive Viewer are fans of radio silence. They are currently, or they are in the process of making a Ready or Not sequel where oh God, why can't I think? I'm just completely blanking on. Samara Weaving is returning, and it was announced today or recently that this was like a week ago, but it was announced that Catherine Newton is going to be in the movie as well. And that's fun because she was in Abigail, which was another radio silence movie, which I really enjoyed. They like radio silence makes like genre movies that I want to revisit a lot. Like their rewatchability factor is so strong, and I love them for that. All that's to say, I really need to rewatch Abigail because it's been since the theater and I really liked it. But what do you make of this news that Catherine Newton is going to be in the Ready or Not sequel alongside Samara Weaving?
Yeah, I'm game for it. She's definitely done plenty of horror movies, along these lines recently. Lisa Frankenstein's kind of different, but Abigail certainly, and Freaky, and I was gonna add, well, I don't want to sidetrack things, but Drop is the new Christopher Landon movie coming out next month, and actually got some pretty solid reviews out of South by.
Nice. I did not which is cool. see any of the reactions, but I saw the trailer and I'm in. I think it's a fun concept.
It's a fun trailer.
Yeah. And Christopher Landon has proven that he can subvert like expectations with the best of them and like do unique things with somewhat tired premises. So I'm excited for that. Yeah.
But for Ready or Not 2, Radio Silence guys, I'm a big fan of their stuff. Don't know exactly how they're going to do it. It seemed like Ready or Not will be one and done. Because of not just even how it ends, but just the general premise seems like you probably wouldn't have that scenario happen twice.
Exactly.
But even Home Alone had a sequel. So
that's
not even the most preposterous movie to have a sequel. There is Taken 3 after all. But anyway,
that's true.
So it's I mean I'm game for it. When the original Ready or Not came out in I think 2019.
I want to say it was like 2019 or 20. Yeah, I think it was 2019 because I think that was the same year as like Knives Out, and like there was a running thing where like that year there was it was 2019, but that year there was like a lot of
Eat the Rich kind of stuff. Yeah. So should be fun. I mean, that first Ready or Not had a really great cast, so I'm sure they'll get a good one together this time too.
I agree, and I really like Catherine Newton from everything she's done in terms of like the genre, like the horror stuff and everything, but like also Blockers is one of my favorite comedies of like recent
Blockers
years. Great. It's fantastic. So and I also really love Freaky. Also, that's another one I need to revisit. But so I'm excited. So speaking of being excited, or speaking of movies in which people die horrifically, do you want to get into our feature review this evening of Mickey 17?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, sweet. So, of course, we're going to be reviewing Mickey 17, and we're going to do a non-spoiler review and then a spoiler review. I will put links or timestamps in the show notes of the episode, which again are at obsessiveviewer.com/obsessiveviewer. If you want to navigate around spoilers or around the episode in its entirety or overall. But before we get to the spoilers, I will play a clip from the trailer. So Mickey 17 is currently in theaters. It was released in theaters on March 7th, and the premise, according to IMDb, is Mickey 17, known as an expendable, goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet. The movie was written and directed by Bong Joon Ho, and it is based on the novel Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. And the cast includes Robert Pattinson, Stephen Yeun, Naomi Ackie, Mark Ruffalo, and Toni Collette. And I'm so mad that I at myself for just running through the cast, because I wanted to say the cast includes Robert Pattinson and Robert Pattinson, because he has a dual role. Anyway, so Mickey 17 is the long gestating movie from Bong Joon Ho, which it is his like first movie since winning many Oscars for Parasite. So it's an interesting kind of quirky sci-fi comedy with some interesting social commentary thrown in as well. So Brent, let's get into it with Mickey 17. What were your expectations, and how'd you feel about the movie?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is one that's been, I would guess if it maybe has to do with Warner's. I don't know if the shooting took longer or whatever, but for some reason, this is one of those movies that kind of kept getting kicked around. I don't know if maybe actor strike at that point when it happened. Not really sure. But if I had to guess, Warner's maybe didn't quite know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's always the classic thing when a movie after it comes out. It's like Warner's wanted a totally different ending. It's always that sort of stuff. But anyway, all that to say that regardless, in terms of before it came out, it had been kind of that shot of Robert Pattinson coming out of the cycler kind of like kept every time you'd see that, it's like, oh well, another Mickey 17 delay. So I mean, I was excited for it. Obviously a huge fan of Parasite and Bong Joon Ho's work in general. Was kind of curious to see if this was to be sort of a blank check or, sort of post-Oscars, go wild sort of thing, kind of to see what he'd come up with. I mean, coming out of the movie, I sort of get that vibe. It definitely seems like generally the kind of movie that you could get if you give Bong Joon Ho $100 million plus budget. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be amazing, because it's not like Parasite cost $80 million, and it really, if you even look at something that would be a closer analogy would, be like something like Snowpiercer. That was like about the third of the budget of Mickey 17. And it's not always about money, but clearly this is something where, you're kind of looking at it, and there's a lot of money on the screen. I think the general headline with this movie is, I think quality wise, it sort of falls more in his other English language features, so Snowpiercer and really especially Oakjaw, as opposed to something like Parasite or Mother or Memories of Murder. I mean, or The Host even. And it's just, for whatever reason, I don't know exactly how, his process is, how it really works, but I think those English language features, for whatever reason, I think just tend to have a lot more in them in terms of thematically, plot-wise, character-wise. There's always a lot of like quirky characters, whereas like you look at something like, Memories of Murder or Parasite, and you're just like, they're just so much like tighter by comparison. You're just like, yes. I'm just like, I don't know if he likes to play and have more fun, with these English language features, but I don't know. They don't quite translate to the same kind of quality to them. There's definitely there is a spirit of playfulness to them, and there's definitely aspects to it that I like. I think overall I like this movie, but it just felt like something where I just would have loved that focus that I think he brings to some of his other movies. So I think that's generally, I think I generally came up on the positive side of this, but it's not like I was thinking it would be anything like Parasite in terms of plot, because it's a totally different story, and what its intentions are, what it's trying to do. but yeah, just really hoping for there was something a little more focused. So
yeah, and that's interesting because that's kind of where I fall with it as well. I loved Parasite so much, and Snowpiercer is a movie that I kind of had to warm up to after a couple of viewings. Like the first viewing, it was bad circumstances. I was half asleep and everything. But when I revisited it some years ago, I got a lot more out of it. And when watching Mickey 17, I kind of kept trying to divorce myself from the thought that a lot of the tone of the subtext and of the commentary that's being leveled in this movie it's pretty on the nose, but also the tone of it is very much in that heightened absurdist sort of comedy, that like goofiness that was in Snowpiercer and done to great effect in Snowpiercer. And like, I kept thinking, like, I wanted to get away from the thought of like, okay, well, he's already done this type of kind of power struggle or class dynamic and everything. And it just felt like a little bit tired. And I don't know, it felt a little bit like it should have been a little bit more focused, like you were saying. And that's a shame, but I did like anticipating this movie. I'm a sucker for a sci-fi movie like this, and I like the concept a lot. I like the idea of, them printing new versions of him after he's died and using that as like this kind of statement about the like workforce. And like, there's a lot of like interesting elements to this movie that are about like workers and like how they're treated by upper management and things, and how they're disposable or expendable and everything. And then like people trying to make better their lives in different ways, but unable to. And then, and also being, under the boot of like a malevolent sort of ego driven leader of like a cult like following. Like there's a lot of pieces to it, but it doesn't have like the sharpness or the nuance of like really exploring those concepts. And I think that the tone overall doesn't need to really explore the concepts fully. Like I don't need like a full treatise on like class dynamics and everything, because we got that in Snowpiercer or we got that in Parasite. Like they're very heavy themes in a lot of Bong Joon Ho's stuff. If you can't tell, I've really only seen Snowpiercer and Parasite, so I'll be referring to those throughout the review. But I just felt like Mickey 17, with those in mind, I feel like should have been a little bit more clear, or a little bit more level, like even-handed with its commentary. Because there's also a whole thing with like the indigenous creatures of the planet, and like everything just felt kind of slight. Like it felt very very underdeveloped or underwritten to an extent, and I just feel like it should have been honed a little bit more. So that's kind of a broad overall thought on Mickey 17.
Yeah, and even the stuff, so if you haven't seen Oakjaw, like the stuff with the critters is very much out of the Oakjaw kind of playbook, in terms of like what that movie is even more towards like, animal rights activism, basically. And it's almost kind of, it's like kind of a girl and this, creature. Oakjaw, it's kind of almost like E.T. a little bit, where, it's kind of like, trying to safeguard this one creature sort of thing, but very much, a lot of kind of through line there too. So it really is. That's the thing I think about this movie to me, is it's like, it's a lot of themes in search of a movie. Yes. And not only is it that, but it's also kind of themes that he's explored a good bit. I will say what you pointed out, like all the stuff about like how workers are treated and like being treated as like disposable, and even the cycler, like what they're made of is basically like organic waste, so they're like basically recycling. So it's like, I think all that stuff is good, and there'll be moments in the movie where you're just kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of a clever commentary, or like that's kind of a neat thing. But then like a lot of, we'll talk about it, but like a lot of stuff in this movie, it feels like it's very tossed off, and or something that there's good amount of voiceover in this movie, and like Robert Pattinson's doing voiceover, and he'll like mention something, and you're like, oh, that's kind of like neat that's how that sort of came out. But then like what you want is for it to build, you know, you want that to like kind of build a world, and it's kind of more just like, well, here's this thing here, and here's this thing, and you know, it's just, again, that's the big thing for me, is I don't even know tonally that I'm super against this movie. I think more for me, it's just have those themes actually cohere closer to the story, because the story just really feels like, I mean, sometimes you can say that's a good thing, where it's like you don't know where the story's going, but it's like and I mean, I think actually as the story goes along, there actually are ways in which you really do know where the story is going with this, especially the third act is, you know, pretty much, which is fine. I mean, pretty much resolves the way you'd think it would, and that's fine. But it's not the thrilling kind of sense when I say like, oh, the story could go anywhere. It almost feels like, well, they probably just arbitrarily picked this path and whatever. You know, that sort of thing.
And that's what's kind of weird to me too, is that I haven't read the novel or anything, but knowing that it's based on a novel, I just feel like there were moments in this movie where I was like, this is so scattered, like the way that you said it, that it's a bunch of themes in search of a movie. I was wondering, and I forgot to look it up, but I was wondering, like, is this like book one of a series of books? Like, is there like a whole series of books of in this universe? And is that why this movie is kind of throwing a lot at the wall at the same time and feeling a little underdeveloped? And that's a shame too, because Bong Joon Ho, like, he's great. Like in Parasite and Snowpiercer, in terms of building worlds and characters and everything. And the rest of his movies, I'm sure. But this just felt so, like, not inconsequential, but it just felt so underdeveloped, and it was kind of a shame. And like you, I also kind of came out in a positive way for this movie. Like, I enjoyed it overall. It felt like it should have been a bit more. It should have been bigger. And when we get to that kind of final climax of the movie, I'm just like, yeah, I want to feel more emotionally invested in this, but I'm just really not, like, because there were so many other like parts that were just not directly related to what the big kind of finale is all about. And it didn't, like you said, it didn't really create a cohesive experience for me.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, like, ultimately, I think coming out positive, like out of the theater feeling like, okay, well, that was kind of fun, was really is Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a, you know, him having a dual role. Technically it's a lot of other iterations, but primarily a dual role. In this, I think he does a great job with it. 17 is a classic kind of, you know, sort of put upon, sort of just trying to, like, you know, flees, or without getting too much on the story, flees Earth, and sort of signs up for this haplessly and doesn't realize, you know, really what this job is going to entail. And then when, you know, his successor is then printed, you know, he does that solid job of what you want people to do in dual roles, where personality wise, they do come out different, which we can kind of talk about. But he does enough, even just by like their body language and like their gait and just their way of speaking, where it's like you're never confused about who's 17 and who's 18. And regardless, they're both like just solid, great performances from him. And again, he does a lot of heavy lifting with the voiceover. There's a lot of kind of exposition stuff, and he has a, you know, he always does a different voice at every movie, and it's he picked a good one. I think it's a fun.
I think so too.
He said that he said that it was based on Steve Buscemi. For some reason, I was getting Steve Buscemi's character in Monsters Inc.
Oh, interesting.
Whatever that character's name is,
Mike Wazowski. No. Yeah, was it? Yeah. No. Not
the lizard.
Yeah.
He's the villain. Yeah.
God, I can't remember his name, but yeah. Anyway, Randall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was getting Randall, even though he is not a villain. Mickey 17 is the villain of this. For some reason, I was getting Randall, but it really is just General Steve Buscemi. You could say Steve Buscemi from Fargo. Really, a lot of other movies, but yeah, it's just a fun. You're always going to get that pretty much with him. And, beyond even just the voice work, I think, a lot of physicality to this performance. It's one of those movies. He's just in it a lot. And
yes,
he has a commitment to this that I think, again, the story issues and direction issues, I think had it been someone else or like it just not have been as big of a deal, if that's the way to say it, that it was like, that performance forward, I might have come down on the side of not really liking it. Yeah. So
he did a phenomenal job, I thought. Like everything you said, like we're in agreement with that. I liked the juxtaposition of 17 and 18, how we'll talk about that, but like the different personality quirks of each one. It kind of, again, like I loved it, I enjoyed it quite a bit because of the performance, but again, it also felt very kind of like easy in terms of the plot element, the kind of messaging of it or the themes of it. Like, okay, yeah, they're two sides of the same personality, but very on different ends of the spectrum, and like one's very aggressive and the other's very kind of soft-spoken, and that creates this identity crisis and everything. And like, that's all well and good, but it just felt like it wasn't touched on enough. It wasn't as prominent as I feel like it should have been. And there's another thing that we can probably save that for spoilers, but like the whole concept of the movie is really interesting to me. But when they introduce the reason that like multiples are like illegal and multiples are like a very horrible thing for society and everything, like the backstory that they established for that, I was like watching it and I was like, this is a better movie than what I'm watching. Like this would make for a better movie than Mickey 17. And it's like an exposition dump with voiceover. It just felt like I was a little bummed by that because I really like that as a concept. And the other thing was, in terms of the pacing, I feel like this movie is a little all over the place, especially because of all of those little disparate kind of themes and ideas and plot threads. But like, I felt like it's like 20 minutes or so before we get like the opening like title card, it seems. And like, there's just so much that builds up to that. And it doesn't feel like it's organically drawn out. It just feels like we have a ton of exposition and information to get out. And like, it does that kind of standard thing where it's like, oh, yep, that's me.
Yeah, this is me. You probably wondered. I was just about to say that.
Exactly. And like, it feels like the movie, like I understand why there had to be a voiceover because like everything there's so much heavy lifting with that. And again, I just feel like Bong Joon Ho is kind of better than that.
Yeah, I mean, he did stuff with how, like, some of the editing in Parasite is, like, insane. Like, some of the sequences, the way that information is conveyed and, like, what you understand about characters, how it builds, like, it's just so expertly done.
Yeah.
And, you just, I don't know, again, is it the scale? Is it because this is a sci-fi epic? I don't know why, but it feels like some of those storytelling instincts are just... I don't know if they're jettisoned. I don't know. Yeah. So I agree about the pacing. There's certain times where it's basically in terms of flashback structure, like where we're going and certain things, they'll kind of like, hone in on one character and then kind of have an aside with them and talk about how they maybe got on the ship, or, things like that. And you're just kind of like, that would be, we're watching, we're catching up on The Last of Us season 1 right now. And that's a show that kind of expertly does character episodes where it will kind of unpack a whole character backstory in one episode. it works great there. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
but and that's a different show. But I mean, regardless.
Unless you read the online reviews of Long Time, episode 3,
Right.
Some people might disagree with you, but
Yeah,
we're
right.
not bigoted assholes here at Obsessive Viewer. So yeah,
or episode 7, really, which is the mall episode, which we just watched last night. But anyway,
nice.
So anyway, regardless, yeah, like that stuff. It feels like just like kind of a clunky machine. It feels like the kind of you know, trucks that they're driving out in this snow in this ice planet, you know, and that sort of thing. So yeah, mixed, but it's yeah, I mean, it's tough because like fundamentally, like if the idea is Warner's sees that Parasite gets so many awards, and they're like, oh, we gotta pay whatever it costs to get him, and we got him, and he's doing a big budget thing. It's like, it just goes to show, like, sometimes instincts are bad at the top levels, like these executives of movie of studios. Yeah. And just like, it's not just more is better, in my opinion, with a director like Bong Joon Ho. Like his best films don't cost more than what, 30 million, 40 million, maybe. Right. I mean, even Snowpiercer, which I think is a good movie, but I think that Okja was probably more. And it's not all about budget, but it's more about like, you know, if you're throwing money at them, there's going to be a different expectation. It informs the kind of movie they make. Yeah. And so yeah, I honestly, more than anything, I almost just chalk this up to studio auteur miscalculation, which for Warner's, I mean, come on, that seems about as on brand as possible. Right. So, but I still think we got a pretty decent Bong Joon Ho movie out of it. So yeah, it wasn't like it's a very obviously very competently done movie. It looks really good. Yeah. And the performances across the board are really solid, especially like obviously Robert Pattinson, but like Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette are way like they're in a different movie. They're like they're over the top, but it's fun. And again, it has those echoes of Snowpiercer tone, and like I like the performances. I just wish that the blueprint of it or the everything packaged around it was stronger. Yeah, for me, I really liked Naomi Ackel. I actually forgot about Blink Twice. Well, I didn't forget about the movie. I guess I kind of forgot she was in. I just didn't. I didn't like that movie. Me neither. I liked her in this. I think she's really good, and she has kind of conundrums to deal with as a result of 17 and 18, and especially in the third. Like she really shows that anyway. Yeah. So yeah, she has a good role there. The Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette characters, I think I think they do this better in Snowpiercer. And like Okja 2 is another one where they have like Jake Gyllenhaal is like a really zany character in that. Okay. And like, I think what they're doing here, like, I don't even think it's like a bad direction of like their performances. I don't know why. I think the two of them, I just sort of was like, I think especially Mark Ruffalo, it was just kind of, and it's funny because I think, coming off of Poor Things, which was, Oscar nominated, and I think he's really good in that. Yeah. And he's not playing a totally different character in this, in Mickey 17. It's just a lot more, and it's getting into the political satire. It's very kind of clear, what they're doing with his character. It's a great takedown of Bidenflation and Hunter. The Biden crime family. This is definitely a movie that was confident that Trump was gonna lose. Yeah. And I have to say, that's about right. It is a movie that seemed like it really felt like they were really prepping for a victory lap, and that didn't happen. But anyway, no. But anyway, I think those two performances, it's not like it's outside of either of their wheelhouses or anything like that. It just didn't quite work for me. For some reason, Toni Collette has a fixation with sauces that seems like it's going to be a quirk, but it like turns into kind of a driving factor in the movie. And I just feel like Mark Ruffalo's character, for as much as they're signaling for what kind of who he's supposed to stand in for in real life. I still couldn't really get quite a hold of his character, even in the caricature. Yeah. Like I couldn't really get a sense of, like, there's a scene where they invites they have like a dinner, basically like a meet and greet with the sort of head of this mission, and I just didn't feel like I got as much out of that scene because I didn't know their characters as well. Their characters being Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette's characters. So, yeah, they're to me more kind of like, I think I just maybe a little bit zonked out of the like Bong Joon Ho sort of like zany character. They felt especially empty to me this time around. So anyway. That's where I was just kind of thinking back to like Alison Pill or Tilda Swinton and Snowpiercer. Yeah, it just felt like with it being such an obvious and direct like critique of like Trumpism and MAGA and everything, but being of such a similar flavor and tone as Snowpiercer, which was 2014. It felt kind of lazy, to be honest. It felt very lazy, even if it was like apropos of the, craziness and zaniness of the world that we are soon gonna bid adieu to, it seems. In the coming that's the thing. It's like, years. Have you seen any headlines about controversy about Mickey 17? Like, I don't really think people care. I don't think so either. It really needled the people that it was maybe trying to needle. And I honestly think it's not for lack of trying. But at the same time, it's like, Also, so anyway, as obvious as it is, and as like kind of clear as it is, that that group of people is not very much like the sharpest. Maybe they didn't even pick up on it. I mean the stuff too about of course the idea of leaving the planet. There are reasons why for Mickey and Stevie Yoon's character who we haven't talked about yet, but why the two of them are looking to sort of flee. But his sort of idea about it, like what he wants to do, why he wants to do this with the planet. I actually think there's some stuff in there that is actually a little more subtle than that's what I think I liked about it. I don't know. I guess I wanted it to be more subtle, but this isn't a subtle movie, so I don't know what I'm even asking for. It's funny because you've referenced Poor Things, and like this is something I'm just spitballing here, but like. And I don't mean to discredit Bong Joon Ho or anything, because like I said, 2 movies of his I love. But I like, you mentioned Poor Things, and I'm like thinking like, what would like Yorgos Lanthimos do with this property, with this story? Like, how would that go? That would be kind of interesting. I don't know. Well, you might get your wish. His remake of Save the Green Planet was Begonia. With Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons. That's about, I mean, the general logline with that about these 2 people capturing this CEO who they're convinced is a lizard person. Oh, interesting. Okay. So you might get that next time out with Yorgos. I honestly did not know anything about that. That is... that is fascinating. I actually still have to see Save the Green Planet. I just know of it. It was a Korean film that came out in the early 2000s. Okay. I still need to catch up with it, but that's why Emma Stone has shorter hair right now, because she shaved her head for that movie. I haven't. So I don't know when that's coming out. I don't know if it's coming out this year still. I'm not sure. But interesting. But yeah, so maybe you'll get your wish with that one. Yeah. I'm very interested in that. Save the Green Planet is kind of a little hard to find, but it's on Canopy right now. Okay. That's one of those ones I really just kind of need to get to before it gets yoinked, because I don't think it's rentable or buyable or streaming on any other service. It's just one of those weird, I don't know who has the licensing to it. But anyway, that's one I'll need to catch up with, certainly before the movie comes out. Yeah. And according to IMDb, it's expected November 7th of 2025. Interesting. Yeah. He tends to turn them around pretty quick. Yeah, so. Absolutely. I still haven't seen Kinds of Kindness.
So yeah, but yeah. Do anything else we can talk about in non-spoilers, or do you want to transition over to spoilers for Mickey 17?
Yeah, well, let's do some spoilers.
Okay, cool. So we are going to go into spoilers for Mickey 17. Of course, like I said at the top of the episode, we do have timestamps in the show notes of the episode to navigate around spoilers if you want to skip to my secondary review of the Electric State. But if you want to stick around for spoilers, I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. And when I come back, we're going to be spoiling Mickey 17.
Hi, Mickey. Are you experiencing any vertigo?
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
Oh, wow! Did you see that?
Nah, I wouldn't be surprised if you're thinking at this point, what have I done?
How lucky can one guy be?
Nothing was working out, and I wanted to get off of Earth.
You're applying to be an expendable?
Yeah.
You read through the whole application.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
I should have read through it.
Once you die, we'll print a new version of your body.
My head keeps
They made me work my ass off on one.
All right, so spoilers on for Mickey 17. Brent, I want to kind of talk about, we didn't, like you said, we didn't really talk much about Steven Yeun in this movie, and I enjoy him in basically everything I've seen him in. I feel like this character Timo is one of those kind of like disparate plot threads that doesn't really coalesce in a strong way. He becomes sort of like this adversarial character through circumstance, but it didn't really come together in a meaningful way for me. And I feel like the resolution of that character is just kind of nothing, like non-existent really. And it just felt kind of perfunctory. I don't know. So it's a shame because I really like Steven Yeun, but yeah, how did you feel about Timo and also just the movie in general now that we're in spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, speaking to Steven Yeun in general, I mean, I guess it sort of reminded me a little bit of like him being in Nope. Like I love, I love seeing him and stuff. And Nope is a movie I was just mixed on for whatever reason. But, like I think he pops into these movies and I think he's doing what he can kind of with the characters. But I guess speaking more to like Mickey 17, it's just, I just felt like, yeah, they didn't really know what to do with him. And you're right, he does kind of function as like a secondary kind of antagonist, maybe tertiary at a certain point in the movie. And yeah, I agree. I think the resolution of what he's doing, just that whole, thing of like that whole loan shark aspect. Like, yeah, let's just leave that in the beginning, have that be the reason they're leaving the planet. Like, do we really need some courier or something to be on the ship and like threaten them? And so Steve Yeun has to kill one of, like, it's just like, who cares?
Yeah,
like, it's just,
especially with everything else going on in the movie, it just feels like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, like they're already kind of, in cages, and everything. And I don't know. It's just like, I think you could just totally drop that. And I think you could just do something else with his character. I mean, these guys are in this restaurant business on Earth. They think macrogreens are going to take off, and they very much do not, apparently.
Right.
And have them, if you're going to have someone like Steve Yeun be in the movie, like have them be more friends. Or I don't know. Like, and there's a side plot about him dealing drugs, which oxy something, which is
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like part from it's like what makes the flamethrower, the gas of a flamethrower or something, and they like cut it with. So anyway, so yeah, again, like that whole thing, it's just like all this stuff, you get into it and you keep kind of pulling all these threads, and soon enough the sweaters kind of come undone. So I don't know. It was kind of a bummer to me to see him in another movie that I just. Like, I understand, like, if you're getting a call, like, to be in a Bong Joon Ho, like, you're not going to say no. If you get a call to be in a Jordan Peele movie, you're not going to say no.
Right.
Like, I totally get his kind of why he would want to follow these projects. It's just, and I'm really only talking of those two. He's, and he's been in, Fantastic Women Are. He's been in plenty of good movies and been great in movies. I think maybe I was thinking of Nope most because it's another movie that I think is, it's sci-fi movie. And then I think it does kind of have a lot of different things in it. It's a follow up from a hot, really hot director and that sort of stuff. So, anyway, they probably don't have anything to do with each other. But
that makes sense. Like it's really interesting because I'm looking at his IMDb now. There are several that I haven't seen, but his role as Warner Brothers executive in Space Jam: A New Legacy. That's joking, but
that's a
whole.
He probably said, "I'll do that one in Space Jam if you can get me with a real director and another WB."
Exactly. Yes, but I talked about Love Me on Patreon several weeks ago. Like he's great in that. Like he's phenomenal. And it just feels like the script needed a lot more time to kind of cook. And
I don't know what Mickey 7, the book, I don't know what kind of the thrust of that is. I don't know. I would guess just based on Bong Joon Ho's, the other themes he's dealt with in the past, that I think those are the things I think he's putting a lot in this movie. And I don't know if that book is more, again, I don't know. I don't know what the kind of themes are in that and kind of what's in the book and what's kind of in his storytelling. Not for me to say, but
same here. And there is a sequel to Mickey 7. It's called Antimatter Blues. So there is a continuation. I don't know. But the movie overall, it just had, we can kind of expand on some of the things we were talking about, but the whole concept of multiples, like I kind of alluded to or directly mentioned, I was really fascinated by that. That whole concept of the guy who invented it is murdering people and it's the multiple of him that's doing it. And that was really interesting to me. And it just sucked to see it kind of relegated to just that. And amidst tons of
one of that serial killer, that was a whole tangent.
Oh yeah. And that's the other thing. All of these exposition dumps are they're so thorough. They're so detailed, but I feel like it's the wrong kind of detail that we need in a movie that's world building like this. Instead, it's just it feels like it's anecdotal, yes, details when it should be more ground based, like drawing out the entire world, the universe and everything. Instead, we get snippets of oh yeah, this is why multiples are illegal and frowned upon, and this is why it could be permanent deletion because of this one thing, instead of being a big commentary on human rights and different things like Moon. Moon is a great example of that, where it's a similar kind of thing, but with very little time, Duncan Jones is able to have a very thought-provoking kind of existential exploration through that story. And here we get a little bit of that in the kind of ways that 17 and 18 react and act and everything, but it just feels very surface level and not as detailed as it should be and not as subtle, like you were saying.
Yeah, and two specific Tom Cruise sci-fi movies, Oblivion, which rips directly off of Moon, and of course, Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat, depending on where you are in the world. Kind of, I think that's maybe the pitch. That's maybe the elevator pitch for this, and that's fine. I mean, it's part of the movie, but I agree. I mean, I like the voiceover, but you bring up a good point where it's the way that he talks about it, it's so matter of fact and almost like he's talking around a, literally like he's talking with a buddy on a construction site or something.
Yes.
There was that one multiple, one of the founders. Yeah, he killed someone, didn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like what? That's really interesting. And we're being shown all of this. And So that's a good point that, not only are they these tangents, but they're really, weighty concepts. And that it's just sort of like, that's another thing in this world anyway. So we're going to go back to the cafeteria where Mark Ruffalo is going to do a speech. It's like, okay, but like, I don't, yeah.
And the sauce thing with Toni Collette, like that just came up. It felt like it came up out of nowhere. And then, like you said, it also the whole thing with like the creatures, like their tails being like that felt like it was like this such a spur of the moment thing. And it's like, we need like a circumstance for them to have to go out there and get the tails and everything. And it just felt so like, 3 minutes ago, like the baby creature is like in mortal danger, and it still is. But like suddenly we have this whiplash of like, oh, okay, now this is happening. Now they need to go do this, or else they're going to be like blown up with these suicide vests. And I'm just like slow down a little bit, like build toward that a little bit better. And it just didn't for me.
Yeah. And I mean, by the time we're out there, I'm sort of like, okay, well, somehow Mark Ruffalo is going to end up out there.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a standoff, probably with 18, and it is. Mm-hmm. And they're both going to die. And they do, it's just sort of like, that's to me, look, again, I mean, there are ways you can get there where it's like, I'd be okay with it. And generally I was whatever, but like, it's just sort of like, you kind of know that's where this movie's going.
Yeah,
like it's not going to be like Mark Ruffalo wins,
right? Yeah.
So and that like becomes her like defining trait. Like it's this whole thing at dinner. It's like, okay, well, it's sauces, that makes sense. But then she does like the thing with the tails, and then later on in the movie when they're cloning, that's a whole other like thing later about how the idea that Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo's characters, they're making clones of themselves after they had died, like that's
which
that's
feels...
like another interesting concept. Like, oh well, like that means effectively like the villain can always just come back,
right? And it feels like that. Like I was so unclear on whether or not that was that a real situation, or is this like him being haunted by the thought of that? It's very
kind of shot like a dream or a nightmare too, so that adds the confusion. Yeah, it's like
it's very, very confusing. And there was also the whole plot line with his coworker. I can't remember her name, but like her lover is crushed by the ice and dies, and there's like that whole thing. But I feel like that didn't lead anywhere for her character or anything. Like it was just kind of left kind of untouched. And that seems like that's going to be
a big deal in the movie.
Absolutely.
Like a really big, because she's threatening, she literally walks out and is, going to talk about it being like, going to basically, snitch on, the multiples violation. And then, God, I'm sorry. Naomi Ackel's character like grabs her and is like, well, what do we have to do to, keep the secret or whatever? And like, you think that's going to be like a really tense negotiation and that's going to carry through. And it's like, it's pretty much resolved. like, or just forgotten, and it's just like
pretty much. And like the next scene, like that's in the moment where like we've been told like why it's important that multiples never exist in this universe, and why it's important as a society that they get rid of them. So like we're establishing that like, okay, these need to be like, this needs to be kept a secret. So that's like making me think that the rest of the movie, or a large chunk of the movie, is going to be like, oh, them doing like the multiplicity thing where they're hiding like who they are, and they have to like kind of adopt each other's personalities or what have you. And then like that, the promise of that as a concept is just completely abandoned, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go kill Kenneth Marshall publicly. And like, it's like the setup for the plot is just completely gone out the window, because it's like, oh yeah, there's multiples now. Like it feels like they just were rewriting it or reworking it as they were going, and was just like, oh, we can still keep this whole thing because that's some suspense there, but let's go ahead and pivot into this whole thing, and then we can have the thrown in plot line of Timo threatening to kill them because he needs to film it for the loan shark. That's
Yeah, and the loan shark
Yeah.
like likes watching videos of people getting like dismembered, or just decapitated or any, whatever, any sort of like ultra violent. I mean, I guess sort of like snuffing for the people that it's like all this stuff. You're just like pick a thing, pick one thing, you know, or even a couple things. But it's just it just kind of keeps just sort of just spinning around. I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, like I don't know the way Bong Joon Ho works. Like, I don't know what makes it about these maybe more, I guess, sci-fi tinged movies, or I hate to say, I keep throwing budget there, but just what I mean, like more kind of I guess maybe I can say spectacly. Not that Okja or Snowpiercer are like $200 million movies, but looking again, I mean, even the host is interesting because it kind of flies in the face of what I just said, because that is technically a spectacle movie. But that doesn't I mean, it actually does invoke some of these themes, and I think does it just tighter. I mean, I don't know. You look at something like Mother, which is like 90 some minutes. And it's, again, that's another movie that's like constructed just, I don't know. Maybe it is just that when he's doing certain genres, it could just be as simple as that. Maybe it's a certain genres. He's just kind of like, he's certain genres is more proficient at than others. I don't know. I guess maybe that's the way it could be said. I mean, because I just, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of somewhat split on his filmography, but even the ones that I'm not as crazy about, I still think they still generally work for me because there are so many interesting ideas. Yeah. And I think that he must just have so much kind of going on that in his head that he wants to kind of explore, that I think they almost can't help but to be somehow kind of a net positive. Right. But it's just like there's definitely certain ones I feel like I appreciate like a lot more. Like, again, it's I mean, it's tough, the whole Parasite thing. That's the big shadow kind of looming over absolutely over Mickey. So
and then kind of finally talking about like the resolution, like the whole thing with the indigenous creatures of the planet, like there's like, it's very surface level, it's unsubtle, it's not subtle at all, but like the whole like, well, we're the aliens here, they're not aliens, they just live here, and trying to other them, trying to create like, oh, they're creepers, like they're like, we're gonna make them the enemy, and like all of those pieces are really interesting, but then it's just like a mad dash to the finish that like, okay, well, they're like, we can create this rudimentary translator thing and talk to them and speak to them, and like that's because Mickey wasn't eaten by them, that means that they were saving him, and that we need to talk to them and work out a solution. And like, again, that is all coming like after we've been inundated with all of these smaller subplots that don't have anything to do with them. And like, when we get to that as like the big climactic like third act of the movie, it just feels like it feels like they're trying to play catch up, when there are so many moments in the movie that also feel like catch up, because it's just setting the stage for things. Like the whole, like I mentioned, the like 15-20 minute like opening sequence that's just backstory and backstory and backstory, and then we get the movie, and then we get more like setting up like the final act of the movie. It felt just very off pace from the start, and it never really recovered from it for me.
Yeah, and like the translator bit too, I think it generally it is what it is, and they do say that it's rudimentary. Yeah. I had a hard time understanding what the translations were. Oh, me too. Which is a problem, because like, yes, okay, I get the device isn't fully functional, but like we kind of need to know what the creature is saying, even if it's just, okay, not complete sentences, even just words, but like, I think even, I don't know if it was the mix or I don't know what it was, but I was like really, and I saw this in IMAX, like I didn't have trouble with any of the other dialogue. So that's just like maybe one technical nitpick. The one, since we're in spoilers, the one thing I did like about like the element with the creepers is the fake out, where it's like you think that the mama is like effectively, we don't know it at the time, like bluffing and saying like if you guys don't return, the baby or whatever, we will literally scream until your eyes and brains explode. And it turns out they can't do that. Yeah. I actually like that resolution at the end.
That was fun.
It was a cool way. And Mickey's like, he's like it turns out they have a good poker face or something. That was I thought that was a really neat resolution of like, because you don't know, and we don't know that much about the creatures, so it's kind of like, oh my god, that is terrifying if they can do that, and it turns out they can't. Like I like
that too.
That wrinkle of that a good bit, but you're right. A lot of the other stuff about it turns out well to them we're the we've seen that. I don't think anything in this is particularly nuanced. Pretty cute creatures.
Yeah, I agree.
What it's worth, but
yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, like we've been criticizing this movie pretty heavily. Like I still came away from it thinking it was fun. Like I rated it 3 stars on Letterboxd. I think it's an enjoyable movie. It's definitely not of the same caliber as Parasite, but I feel like even though the pieces are there to where it could have been, it didn't need to be. Like it's not like I didn't go into it thinking like, oh, Mickey 17 is going to be it's going to sweep the Oscars or anything. Like I'm not fooling myself into thinking that. And it's still an enjoyable time, but it's so hectic and disjointed that I just feel like it could have been better than it was, but it was still an okay time.
Yeah, I think that finale too, with the kind of the critters and them and the two kind of Suicide Squad vests, I think works. The parts of it did kind of remind me of both of the Dune movies a little bit. Oh yeah, another WB big budget project. But yeah, like that stuff works. I think the production design is solid. I think the stuff that they spent money on was probably money well spent in terms of like, again, I think the production design like of the ship is really solid. Yeah. Like I like all of the different parts of like the ship, their rooms and like the halls and all of that stuff. So that's cool. It has a great kind of scale to it. Yeah. That sort of stuff I think is really sturdy. And again, I think the performances are mainly Pattinson and like Naomi Ackel kind of kept me in this. I think like just kind of their characters.
Their chemistry is good. I like that. Yeah.
So, and I think for me, ultimately, it's like, it's still so much interesting stuff that even though it's a mess, like, it's like, it's a mess I'd rather watch. I think it's a mess with so many other interesting ideas as opposed to, I mean, we see movies all the time that are messes, but not even in ways that are fulfilling where it's like, where they're even exploring interesting avenues. Right. This movie is exploring, I think, a lot of interesting avenues, and there are fun, I think, kind of either bits of dark comedy or satire that are great. It's just that for me, it's that focus really is the big thing. I keep coming back to that, but it's really that's the hardest thing for me to kind of get over. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what he'll do next. Yeah, but he's he's an interesting director, and I just wonder if this is just something where it was like, you look at the history of kind of blank check movies, and it's like, it's not always, sometimes it's really great. And, and you look at something, and we were talking about like the Odyssey, like that's technically not really a blank check movie because same studio, and, he was already with Universal, and they already put a lot of money into Oppenheimer and all that stuff. Yeah. But, there are times when it's more like a kind of a big swing sort of thing. And I think this definitely falls in this category, but, yeah.
What did you rate it on Letterboxd?
I was 3 as well.
3. Yeah. One final thing, and then we can close out the review. We didn't talk anything about this, and I think that's normal because the movie doesn't do anything with it either. But like, there's like the moment where he's like signing on for the expendable program. He is like, it's the first, like the doctor lady is basically demonstrating it and everything. Like he's like, his voiceover is telling us like, yeah, I feel bad because I was responsible for my mother's death or something like that. And like, there's a flashback, a brief flashback where like, I feel like it's the exact same actress who was the like doctor person. And I was like, are they going to like, is it going to lead to a thing where like, because we only see her from the back and it's like the same color hair, the same length and everything. And I was like,
I noticed that.
Yeah. And then there's nothing there. There's nothing. Like it felt very,
there's the whole thing about the memory brick that, that's again, I mean, there's the whole way the cycler works and how the people who kind of work around the cycler are kind of all like kind of morons, and they're constantly knocking cables out, or like they don't have the kind of gurney or platform ready for, like that's funny. And like there's that one scene too of like The Rock, they have this dispute about The Rock not being able to fit, and it's like like it'll fit, and it's like I'm telling you it's not going to fit and it's going to break something. I'm going to be so mad. Like I like that through line of like, maybe they didn't send their best and brightest up there. Like, that's a fun through line. It's not even a through line. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but it's never really explicitly said.
Yeah, it's like an overarching theme of just like workplace incompetence, and that's great because of the central like concept of Mickey as an expendable who is like, that's his bread and butter. He's dying horrifically numerous times and being reprinted because of like testing and like having that kind of devaluing of him because he's an expendable. Like all of that is stuff that is just right there and just not really explored hardly at all. It's just it's a really frustrating movie for me.
Well, and wouldn't it be funny if either the original Mickey Barnes was super smart and somehow he got trapped and so he's the smartest guy in this thing, and yet he gets sent out on all the guinea pig stuff where they shoot nerve gas at him, and yet he's the smartest one around. Like that would be a fun thing. Or have one of the Mickey variants be like way smart, and he's like, I can't die. Like have too much. I don't know. God, I'm probably. It's like it's already too many cooks in the kitchen. But,
absolutely.
But again, I think what I just said literally speaks to, I guess, kind of my like defense of the movie is that it opens up, I think, so many interesting doors, which I think the best sci-fi movies do.
Yeah.
That it's hard for me to just be like, oh, it's like overall, I think it worked for me because it does kind of, kind of get your mind going after. So yeah. I think if he chooses to go this kind of sci-fi route again, I don't think need to do that. How much did Moon cost? We talked about Moon,
right? Yeah.
Moon probably cost, $10 million to make, if that. I mean, that was back in 2009.
Yeah.
You don't always need a bunch of money for this stuff. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, that's our review of Mickey 17. Again, it's in theaters now, and we both rated it 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. And yeah, Brent, you're gonna go away. We're gonna bid adieu to you.
I don't want to stick around for this one, man.
Oh my god,
this is all you.
All day today, I was thinking, how the hell am I going to talk about this movie? Because it is a nothing burger of a movie. But you guys will see. Anyway, but before you go, do you want to tell people where they can find you online and what you've got coming down the pike at awakeinthedark.com?
Yeah, you can find me. Yeah, awakeinthedark.com is probably the best place. I'm on Facebook, Twitter X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, all those. Should be doing Black Bag next. God help me, I think I might review Snow White, which I don't want to. Yeah. I have seen several and reviewed several live action Disney remakes that I can, but I'll do my best. So those 2 coming up, and then I don't know what else from there. But yeah, after Snow White, I might have to rethink things career-wise.
Sure.
Might have to maybe hang the critic hat up for good after that one. Yeah.
Well, links to all of Brent's stuff is in the show notes of this episode. And once again, Brent, thank you so much for joining me for this review of Mickey 17. And for the listeners, we're going to go ahead and go into the secondary review, so stay tuned. And before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast YouTube channel as well. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use the promo code OBSESS when you sign up for a new account. You'll get up to 2 months free depending on when you sign up, and we'll get a commission on it as well. More details on that in the show notes of this episode. And now back to the show.
They tell me I view obsessively.
The Bot Rebellion was ugly.
They don't eat. They don't sleep. They don't blink. I blink.
When the robots deviated from their assigned task, we banished them to the electric state.
All right, so for tonight's secondary review, I'm sharing my thoughts on The Electric State, which is a Netflix original movie that is going to be released on March 14th, 2025. This is going to be a non-spoiler review of the movie, so no worries on spoilers or anything. The premise, according to IMDb, is an orphaned teen hits the road with a mysterious robot to find her long-lost brother, teaming up with a smuggler and his wisecracking sidekick. Directors for this movie were Joe and Anthony Russo, who of course did several of the MCU movies and movies that do not get a lot of acclaim outside of the MCU, like The Gray Man or Cherry. And the movie was written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who also write MCU movies, and it is based on the book by Simon Stollenhag. And the cast includes Woody Norman, Millie Bobby Brown, Chris Pratt, Holly Hunter, Stanley Tucci, Woody Harrelson, Giancarlo Esposito, Jason Alexander, Ki-Hu Kwan, Coleman Domingo, and Anthony Mackie. Now, once again, this is going to be a non-spoiler review, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I hated this movie. It's something interesting. Not a lot of it is interesting. There's not a lot interesting about this movie. It is very much feels like a piecemealed together movie that really just has no life to it. It is very lifeless. I will commend it for clearly having money behind it to make visual effects look pretty solid. But at the end of the day, this is just kind of a nothing burger dumpster fire of a movie. And it's really kind of a shame, I guess. I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I mean, the cast is amazing. The Russo brothers, they have proven themselves to be very good filmmakers with their entries in the MCU, and they've done some really interesting stuff over their career. But I don't understand why there is such a disconnect between their work in the MCU and like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War. Those are top tier MCU movies. And for them to just strike just nothing outside of the MCU is really, really kind of crazy to me. And the fact that they're going to be doing Doomsday for the MCU is a little bit concerning. Yes, it would be back in their comfort zone or back where they've proven themselves to be good, but I'm just so surprised by the completely stark contrast between their non-MCU work and their MCU work. And I was thinking throughout this movie, at the beginning at least, I was thinking well, maybe I'm giving too much credit to the Russo brothers. Maybe that's a Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely thing. Maybe they were the secret sauce of the good MCU movies. And I said that, or I thought that, having not knowing that they wrote this movie as well. And I looked up who wrote this movie, thinking okay, well, maybe the maybe the Russos were just a little bit pigeonholed by a weak script. And like, I just kind of cackled with laughter that they wrote this script as well. And of course, it's based on a book. I don't know much about the book. I believe it's a graphic novel. I don't know how close it is to how close the movie is to it or anything like that. But it's really frustrating. So let me get into it. Again, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but this was a movie that is, I think, like 2 hours and 18 minutes. It's like ridiculously long for what it is. It might be like 2 hours and 8 minutes. But anyway, I decided to watch it kind of late at night. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see how it is. It's science fiction. I'm always game for that. But I didn't know anything about it. I knew nothing about it. And I started it. And once it was revealed that it's like this alternate reality or alternate history thing, like robots are manufactured throughout history, and in the 90s there's like this revolt and there's a war that goes on, so now all robots are outlawed and they're in this like concentrated camp area that is referenced in the trailer, but they are kind of put there and they're outlawed. And like, that stuff is kind of interesting. It's vaguely interesting because I like the idea of this world in which, robots are feared and outlawed, and they're like these mythical sort of like creatures, boogeymen in this universe. But like the contrast of that, like it tries to go for this goofy kind of comedic thing where it's like a lot of the robots are like these cartoonish robot things, like cartoonish ads for things. Like I mentioned in the cast list that Woody Harrelson is in the cast. He voices Mr. Peanut, like the actual Mr. Peanut, as like a robot, and he is kind of a figurehead for the robot movement. And I guess it's supposed to be played as somewhat comedic because it's a silly thing to propose in the movie that like, okay, the leader of the robots is a sentient Mr. Peanut robot. And that's all well and good. Like, that's interesting, but I feel like the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand in regards to the overall tone and the way to infuse comedy into it, because it just comes across as very flat and very dull in terms of being lighthearted. And it's also in contrast to different, like a pretty bleak storyline, or a much darker storyline than the comedy aspirations would have it, would have you think. Like, this is about a young girl who loses her entire family and becomes in contact with this robot who she believes is like possessed by, or it like has the spirit or has the knowledge of where her brother is, who her brother had passed away. And there's also confusion about that because there's like this flashback that opens the movie, and I was kind of confused because I thought that they were both like orphans at the time, but I guess they weren't. And there was a whole thing. It was really kind of muddled for me, and it was a little confusing at the beginning. But as the movie progressed, like, there are some clear issues that I have with it that are kind of rampant in Netflix movies in particular. So back in January, when I had Nick Rogers on and we talked about Back in Action, I mentioned this about Netflix movies and like the kind of visual hue of Netflix original movies. And I had mentioned that it just looks very much like the cinematography, the set design looks very polished and almost like a faux David Fincher kind of aesthetic. But I can't escape, like in Back in Action and in the Electric State, I can't escape this kind of feeling that there's just something missing in like these sets that are designed specifically for Netflix movies. And what I mean by that is, like, in Back in Action, there is a gas station, And in that gas station, there is like one teller, maybe one or two customers. It is in this desolate place that there's no traffic on the street. And the way that it's shot is it's an establishing shot of this gas station, convenience store, restaurant place. And like, it's just very desolate. And when you have a setting that is desolate like that and lit the way that it's lit, it's very dark, it's very ominous. That's supposed to convey that it's dark and ominous, and it's suspicious, or it's tense, or what have you. But like in Back in Action, it really just feels like they don't understand how to populate a scene to make it look like it's a real location. Like, it just feels not necessarily like it's a backdrop or like it's green screen or anything like that, but there's just this inauthenticity, this inauthentic quality to the way that a lot of Netflix movies that I've seen are shot and filmed, and the way that the sets are designed and constructed. And that was very evident in Back in Action in a few different sequences, most notably that gas station scene. And I don't know the ins and outs of it. I don't know what could have possibly contributed to that, but it's also evident in the Electric State. Like, there is, I don't know if it's necessarily a gas station, but it's the same type of thing. Like, Millie Bobby Brown meets up with Chris Pratt outside of this, like, their first encounter is outside of this like warehouse place, or this building that he arrives at, and he does like this smuggler deal with this robot, or it's not robot, but it's like a avatar that they have, like virtual reality avatar thing, that is a robot, but it's just their consciousness. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So he's meeting for a clandestine like deal to go down to smuggle something or whatever. And like, again, it's a dark scene. It's nighttime, and he's meeting secretly with this person, but like, there are ways to set that up to where it's like, yeah, it's clear that this is like a secret meeting and everything. Like, you would have to convey that they are alone, but the way that the camera shows that they're alone is like, there's one bystander who is kind of like an unhoused person who's just kind of sleeping on the sidewalk, and you just have like a tight shot of them and the robot that Millie Bobby Brown is partnered up with, interacting with her. And then you get a shot of Chris Pratt and his robot avatar person that he's dealing with. And like, it's just like, it feels like there's nothing in the background to convey that this is a real location. There's nothing to convey that this is a place that people have like parked in, or and I'm not saying that as in the sense that, oh, I need there to be cars all over the place in the scene, or I need to see people walking like bystanders. It's just like this thing that's not really that easy to describe. It's not like this tactile sensation that like you look at it and it's not something that I can really put clearly into words, except that it's just that the way that it looks, maybe it's something to do with like if they use the volume, maybe it's something like that, but it just doesn't feel like everything in the frame exists in a real location. Like, it feels like if you were to widen the shot, you would see like the lot or whatever of the studio, or the next set over. Like, it just feels like there's just something missing. There's something missing in a lot of these Netflix movies, and I can't put my finger on it. And it's starting to get to the point where it's driving me a little bit crazy, because it's so frustrating. It really takes my attention away from the movie. And not to say that this was a movie that demanded my attention or anything, but it did kind of just take me out of the running in terms of having like an appreciation for the story being told, because I'm distracted by this like lackluster visualization that's showcased throughout the movie. So enough of that griping. I will say that the plot is kind of garbage. It's shocking to me that this is based on an intellectual property. It is shocking to me that there is something that is the blueprint for this story, specifically because, and this is going to be kind of a cheap dig, I think, but I specifically feel that way because I would have bet good money that if I were not to know that it was based on a book, while watching the movie, I would have bet good money that this was a movie that was basically constructed from the algorithm. And what I mean by that is that this is like the most just like lifeless sort of storyline. And it is put together in such a way that there is no care. There's no real like even stakes at play here. Like there's some pretty big things that happen, but it just feels so perfunctory. It feels so lifeless. And when you have a story that is about this girl that is like has lost her family and is trying to get her family back, and she's in like a terrible home with a verbally abusive and restrictive foster parent, like who had like she has like an ankle monitor on and everything. Like when you don't have like a bedrock for the story and her journey, it just falls so flat. And I respect Millie Bobby Brown. I've liked her in Stranger Things, but I don't know. Like I enjoyed Enola Holmes. I think it was. I think I did. That was 2020. That was everything's a blur from that year. But like she just doesn't have like much to do here, and she doesn't have much energy in the movie. And it's a shame because I think that she's talented, but they keep trying to make her into a movie star, Netflix in particular, and I don't think it's working because the movies are not good. There's nothing that is going to just blow anyone away. And it's a shame. And when it comes to the Electric State, that is part and parcel, like everything. Like this is not gonna be a hit for Netflix. And it's because of that algorithmic way that it feels like it's been put together. In particular, and again, I am shocked that this is based on a pre-existing property. I don't know how close it is to the book. I don't know how many liberties were taken with it. I don't know what the ins and outs of it. I don't know anything about the source material, but it does not feel like it is based on anything because it feels like it is ripping off of everything. And in particular, the character of Keats, played by Chris Pratt, is such a blatant and like annoyingly obvious knockoff of Han Solo. Like he is a smuggler. He's like wearing this vest. He's kind of got this like this kind of selfish leaning sort of attitude and disposition and everything. And he's like reluctantly helping Millie Bobby Brown and Christopher, played by Woody Norman, the robot, helping them to do their thing. And it's like, that's Han Solo. It is such an uninspired ripoff. Like it's really aggravating. And the rest of the movie, and I say the rest of the movie because there's not really much to the movie outside of the central premise, but the rest of the movie, where it's about Michelle, played by Millie Bobby Brown, trying to find her brother who died and she believes is still alive, as his consciousness is connected to this robot that comes to her. So it's basically like a sort of like a Lassie alerting someone that, Timmy fell in a well. It's kind of that kind of scenario. But the way that it's played out and the way that it's very much like a lifeless entity in this movie. The overall plot in terms of it, like the plot being a lifeless entity, is that it's just riffing off of and ripping off of E.T. Like, it is an E.T. story, and it's just like it's trying to capture that Amblin magic of like young people on an adventure, or a young person trying to basically thrust into this adventure, and the stakes are high because her family's involved, and like there's tragic backstory for her childhood and everything, and it just really feels just like it is going through the motions. It is like it's on autopilot. It doesn't even feel like it's trying to be like a Member Berries, like nostalgia thing. It just feels like it's cribbing off of better movies and hoping to get a pass. And it really struggled to hold my attention throughout the movie. It was such a slog. Like, this movie is a little over 2 hours long, and I got about halfway through and I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty okay. It's okay. I'm about halfway through. I wasn't halfway through. I was like 30 minutes through. I had like an hour and a half left, just about, and a little over an hour and a half, I think. And I was just like, this is rough. This is really rough. And like the comic relief or the comedic elements of like this, like put upon smuggler guy who's reluctantly helping the young, not even idealistic, but just young woman that's trying to get to her brother. Like, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It feels like they're not into it. They're not giving it their all. It's like everyone's kind of sleepwalking through the story. And the most like interesting element of it is that they basically, the big MacGuffin of the movie involves them having to go into the electric state and basically traverse this Wild West or wild environment with all of these like robots that have been basically stationed there or held prisoner there for years at this point, and they have to go to a certain location, and it's all like it's all very just cookie cutter, and like even the villains of the movie don't have much going for them in terms of any kind of motivation or any kind of like interesting characterization. It's just really, it's such a slog, and I can't recommend it. I really can't. I ended up rating it 1 star on Letterboxd. I cannot recommend it. It's not good. It's really just kind of a train wreck, and it's such a shame because I believe in Anthony Russo and Joe Russo as filmmakers. I believe and know that they can pull off something good. They can make good movies, especially considering their work in the MCU. But they're just proving time and time again, like it's not that easy. And Netflix is just throwing money at them to make this garbage, and it just doesn't work. It does not work. So it's a shame too, because like I said, the cast is amazing. Like, there's a lot to the cast, but they don't have anything to do. Like, there is not really that much of a standout character really in the entire movie outside of Millie Bobby Brown and Woody Norman. But even their storyline and their connection and their bond throughout the movie is like bare minimum screenwriting if I ever saw it. So if it was ever written, like, it really does feel like AI generated. It's not that bad, but like it feels like it's something that's built off of an algorithm, off of the marketing kind of market research of Netflix. Like, oh, people like this. They like robots. They like Millie Bobby Brown. They like, Amblin movies. Let's make this, and the Russo brothers can handle it. It's just, it sucks. I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's a waste of time or anything, but don't waste your time. There's not really much to cling on to here with the Electric State. So with that glowing review, the Electric State is going to be dropping on Netflix on March 14th. Yes. March 14th on Netflix. Don't see it, but if you do, let me know what you thought of it, and let me know if I was right or if I'm completely off base. Just let me know. I am going to close out this episode. I'm not going to do a potpourri section this week, but next week on the show, we're going to be reviewing Novocaine again with Brent. And I think I might review Borderline, which is going to be on digital this week. So that is probably the plan for next week, but for now, that's it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. Once again, I want to say thank you to Brent Leuthold for joining me for the first half of this episode. Check out his work at awakeinthedark.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure you follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also, check out our other podcasts, Tower Junkies and Anthology. Links to all those are in the show notes and at obsessiveviewer.com. Until next week, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. He's great. Like, I think he has this very affable quality to him in all of his roles, that he can also turn on a dime and be intimidating in some cases or intense in other cases. And I just really like that about him. I think that he has this charm to him that is very much like movie star quality that I think carries through in Novocaine and is also evident in pretty much everything that I've seen him in. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Check out the show notes for your promo code to get started podcasting today.